Perhaps only its renown, the mythology, is more powerful than its actual presence. The mighty Mississippi River, tracing through the heart of North America. The quintessential American metaphor, yet its history is markedly French. There are 7,000 kilometers of separation from the heart of old Europe, the Seine floating through Paris. It is here in the fabled city of light, the eternal collector of ideas and discourse, the brothers Moutin, François and Louis, grew up on the music improvised on the shores of the Big Muddy. Musicians since childhood, the language they speak is jazz.
Ah oui, ça marche très bien avec ça. Ça marche. Parce que justement, il y a un retour subtil au truc d'origine. Tu vois?
For a recent U.S. tour, the Moutin Factory Quintet took a road trip. Mississippi dreaming. First stop, New York City. For 20 years, Norman Riley has been the sound engineer and road manager for the Moutin's American performances. A fellow musician and trusted friend. Due to health issues, Norman will not be on this tour. Far more worrisome, Louis Moutin has fallen ill, delaying his arrival in the States. All of the responsibilities for the highly anticipated tour have fallen on François' shoulders. How nice it would be to simply show up at the venues, stage already set, and just perform to a waiting audience.
So, this is
which one are you?
P150. I think it's probably going to be this one. She's going to come down tomorrow and play this one and play that one.
For a French jazz quintet, venturing out into the middle of the U.S., this can only be a self-initiated, self-sustained endeavor. The brothers are responsible for every detail. The creative act starts by renting, then packing the vans with Norman's equipment. Then, seeing what unfolds.
Good show, man. Good show.
Man, I wish you came with us. You know?
Yeah, you'll be all right. You'll be fine.
Well,
you'll be fine.
I'll be on the phone.
Tearing that up. I'm gonna call. I'm gonna be calling.
We need now. It's about Louis joining them. You know?
Yeah.
On est en train de démarrer, je crois, la 24e ou 25e tournée des groupes des Frères Moutin aux États-Unis. On fait ça depuis le début des années 2000. Et cette tournée-là a énormément de sens parce qu'on va, pour la première fois, explorer des territoires dans lesquels on n'a jamais été. Mais on commence d'abord par aller à Cleveland et à Chicago, qui sont des endroits où on a déjà joué. Et puis à partir de là, c'est l'aventure. On descend le long de la Mississippi River et on va se retrouver dans des coins où on n'a jamais joué. On n'est absolument pas sûr de ce qu'ils ont comme matos, comme matériel, comme équipement pour les concerts. Donc, on a pris avec nous plein de choses pour suppléer le cas échéant. C'est un vrai road trip, c'est une véritable aventure.
13 days, 5,000 kilometers, 9 concerts. The first destination, Cleveland, Ohio, where François will meet up with the band, then perform. The show must go on.
Louis et moi, on est frères jumeaux, donc on joue ensemble en fait depuis qu'on a commencé à jouer de la musique. Je pense qu'on avait 5 ans quand on a commencé à jouer, d'une manière totalement autodidacte. parce qu'on avait des instruments à la maison et aussi déjà un début de culture musicale, puisque nos parents écoutaient énormément de musique, principalement du jazz, mais pas seulement, qu'on avait beaucoup de disques à la maison.
Parlaying their passion into a career only followed after both men had attained engineering degrees. Louis added a master's in mathematics, Francois a doctorate in physics. It is by choice that Francois is at a truck stop in Ohio pumping gas, wondering when his credit card will max out, anxious about the band's arrival for the Cleveland gig, concerned about the slightest detail of everything. The good news, much to his doctor's concern, Louis is traveling to make the dates.
Interstate 77, northbound towards Erie, Pennsylvania. Then stay in the road.
1,300 kilometers further along the jazz tour, Chicago. Here where the shores of Lake Michigan meet the Chicago River, the Frenchman Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable established a trading post in the 1780s. This important river juncture led west to the waterways to the interior of the continent. It was explorers Louis Joliet and Father Jacques Marquette who discovered the portage 100 years before. Sieur de La Salle would be the next Frenchman to leave his mark. For the city, this is all ancient history with only a few statues and some street signs which note the French past. On the south side of town, in the city's first black enclave, Bronzeville, its cultural heritage is memorialized. When Afro-Americans, former slaves, and children of slaves began leaving the South in large numbers at the beginning of the 20th century, Chicago was the beacon promising economic and personal freedom. Its industrial base contrasted sharply with the South's slower agrarian economy and lingering regressive social attitudes. The musicians and the music led the way. The Great Migration. Today, kids play football in a park honoring jazz pianist Lil Hardin Armstrong. Her husband, Louis, an early migrant up from New Orleans. This beauty supply store was once the ultra-hip Sunset Jazz Club. And if the past is a springboard to the future, photographer Chanel Joly uses the spirit of the jazz age, adding her own creativity to celebrate Black women in picture. The poet Tayeni Akanke expresses it in words.
I am royal, skilled, and filled with will and truth, to say the least. Whose once broken soul could never be beat. I'm yin with yang, beauty, and the beast. Wearing the right size of audacious on my feet. And healing, that's the entree I make sure I eat. And remember, it's Tuyeni Akanke when you call me. Breath blows life, healing words for eternity. Is this mic on? Can y'all hear me? Because it's with divine eyes you will see the God oozing out of me. And this pretty body, it's not mine, it's only temporary. But my spirit, the real beauty, yeah, that's all me. And I appreciate honesty. Give me the real shit, don't spare me, cause I combat insecurity with the fist of reality that folks are human just like me, hey! And I'm 12,000 watts of, yep, you got it, oh, energy. And when I step on stage, it's like a synergy. And my words first to the bullshit, move like machete. So get ready, this poet rocks your world. All y'all gotta do is play a little jazz music behind that, right? Get ready, this poet rocks your world.
The North Side, Chicago's premier jazz club, the Green Mill. For 2 nights, the Moutin Factory Quintet. François on bass, Louis on drums, Jean-Michel Pilk on piano, saxophonist Christophe Monio, Manu Kogia on guitar. The critic, Neil Tesser, has been chronicling jazz for over 5 decades.
The guys in this band are clearly versed in the entire history of jazz, not only American jazz, but European jazz, and specifically French jazz. But it comes out in everything they play. I mean, these guys have been extraordinary virtuosos for a quarter century. And anybody who's seriously listening would know that. I think jazz is alive and even well because of its ability to absorb other influences and change along the way. I mean, that's been its history from the start. It's a sponge. It uses improvisation to riff off of other existing forms, building its own history along the way, but always open to other influences. And then, again, through the miracle of improvisation and the genius of the highly qualified people who produce jazz, jazz is the place where musicians grow. Then they can go do other things, but they almost always come back and continue pushing the music forward. So yeah, I don't think it ever dies. It becomes too difficult for some people, but that's their loss. It's like poetry. You get out of it what you put into it.
No time to ruminate. Early Sunday a.m. Direction, St. Louis. 6,000 kilometers to travel for a late afternoon concert in the neighboring Saint Geneviève, Missouri, the first European settlement on the west side of the Mississippi River. In the 17th century, this was a wilderness populated by scattered tribes of Native Americans, explored by les coureurs de bois, adventurers, trappers. Spreading out from the settlements in Quebec, they traveled through the Great Lakes and wandered the waterways. Through their interactions with the Indians, the Europeans had heard of the Big River. What was it and where did it go? Might it possibly lead west to the Pacific? In 1673, Joliet and Marquette had paddled down the Mississippi, but they didn't reach where the great waterway concludes. February 10th, 1682. René Robert Cavalier Sierre de la Salle launched his tiny flotilla of elm bark canoes to find the river's mouth. 23 Frenchmen and 18 indigenous people embarking where the westward flowing Illinois River empties into the Great River. Paddling west with the current, they went downstream. The outline of New France was being drawn. Eventually, French settlers migrated to this region, which had become known as Illinois country. The first permanent settlements were on the east side of the river. Around the year 1720, the first steps were taken to settle the western shore. The site chosen was excellent for farming, with no Native American villages nearby, giving a sense of security. These descendants of French colonials named their hamlet Sainte-Geneviève, in honor of Paris's patron saint. Already 2 or 3 generations removed from their native land, the venerable traditions carried forth. Agriculture and culinary methods, construction techniques and administrative procedures. Le coutume de Paris was the code of civil law. Spiritually and socially, the Catholic Church was the center of life. New France was being developed along the river byways of North America.
The problem is that we are in the interior of America as opposed to the coastal provinces that the British had. They can ship people directly in. To get to the center of New France here, you either had to go sail to Quebec or Montreal, come down the rivers in canoes, or you had to come to New Orleans and pole your way or cordel your way up the river. So it's much more difficult to get the people here. It was much more difficult to get goods here. So again, the river was so important. It was the only highway we had between, Chicago and New Orleans. This is our road.
The character of Sainte-Geneviève began to change with the birth of the United States, followed by its acquisition of the Louisiana Territory. Today, the remaining colonial homes, the museum, and the old stones serve to remind of the Gallic past. This year's annual French history seminar concluded with Dennis Stromat's rendition of the region's traditional music in the local Cajun dialect, paw paw. A jazz concert to follow. Je me souviens.
On a l'impression d'être 200 ans en arrière ou 250 ans.
Ouais. C'est vieux.
Alors, je sais pas si ça me fait penser un peu à un peu de la musique irlandaise aussi, ça ressemble un peu.
Ouais, c'est comme ça. C'est presque parce que.
Un peu bourré aussi parfois.
C'est Bretagne.
Celte un peu quand même.
Oui, absolument. Parce que nos ancêtres ont descendu le lac Saint-Laurent parce qu'ils ont arrivé de Bretagne en première. Parce que nos ancêtres arrivaient de Normandie et Bretagne. Parce que pour ça, c'est notre musique comme la musique celtique.
Ouais.
C'était un mélange parce que, et des fois, parce qu'on est dans les années passées, on était en la Louisiane
Oui,
aussi.
c'était grand.
Ouais, c'est pour ça. On a à des fois, tu peux trouver les mélanges de la musique, comme la musique cajun dans la Louisiane, des fois. Parce qu'on a 2 ou 3 de la même chanson. Et on joue la musique presque comme les Cajuns. Des fois, mais pas tout ça.
Et elle s'est transmise oralement, la musique.
Ouais, sur oralement. Ouais. Mais je ne dis pas dans le livre. Pas dans le livre. C'est juste avec les oreilles. C'est comme ça, oral. Ouais. Ouais, absolument. Ouais, bonne chance. Bonne chance ici.
Enchanté.
Before the main event, exchanges of honor.
Approchez. En jus. Feu. Très bien, this is what everyone does. Recuperate. Okay.
This is a statue of Sainte Geneviève. Thank you for your welcoming. This is a statue of Sainte Geneviève. He comes right from the Saint-Sulpice church in Paris. We wanted to, okay? So just to tell how welcome. Guys, they're so great, right? Yeah. You know, the guitar,
The enthusiasm for and the energy of the music could not be deterred by either the relentless mosquitoes, the size of jet bombers, or the falling of darkness.
piano, the one and only Jean-Michel piano.
2 jumeaux dans le même trou. Oui, tu peux aller derrière. Toujours.
Le temps dure longtemps.
– 105 kilometers away, East St. Louis.
But now, looking straight ahead, I want you to really capture this sight line of downtown St. Louis. You can see we're coming almost right through the legs of the Gateway Arch. This is a very picturesque view. And if we could ever bury these utility poles and get these lines out of the way, it would look probably on par with your Eiffel Tower.
The gateway to the West, celebrated by architect Saarinen elegant arch. St. Louis, founded in 1762 by the French fur traders Laclede et Chouteau at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. A manufacturing base, service sector, and transportation hub all developed around the port. Its little sister on the opposite shore, East St. Louis, Illinois, prospered as well, at least until the mid-20th century. Today, in the hometown of the renowned jazz musician Miles Davis, only dilapidated vestiges remain of its former well-being. Former Mayor Alvin Parks is a leader in the urban renewal efforts.
When Miles was growing up, in the 1930s, 1940s, into the early 1950s in East St. Louis had more jobs than it had people. East St. Louis had the second largest rail center in the country. East St. Louis was the second largest packing house center in the country.
The decline?
Really began in the late 1950s. Our city has seen a decline in business and therefore a decline in residents. We lost 2/3 of our population in the span of about 50 years. That's a dramatic loss of people. And the city is still coming back up. We still have a long way to come. But when your business base leaves, people look and say, there's not a lot of reason to stay. But we've got to get that industry back. And one of the things I'll say is that because African Americans have always had a rougher road than our counterparts, Miles would say the same thing that he experienced. Just because you see a little bit of poverty doesn't mean that you have to think in a poor way.
The native son, Miles Davis, he spent his formative years here when the area was vibrant and middle class. The importance of the community renovation project goes beyond honoring the seminal trumpetist. This is the kickstart of the neighborhood's rebirth and an educational center for the young.
About 20 minutes from here. Left Alton when he was a little boy and his family moved to East St. Louis. And he grew up in this house. And we're very proud of the fact that we were able to restore his home.
The musical legacy of Miles persists. History transforms into legend.
For Miles Dewey Davis III, in memoriam, in futurium. Dum 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 dum. Doo-wee, dressed up in pain, the flatted fifth began his funereal climb up the tribal stairwell. Grief radiant as it bulged and gleamed with moans, spread like laughter, ha 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 ha, or Ethiopia's wings, mourned its own percussive rise, became blues born in the hoarse East St. Louis air.
That's it. Oh, way to go, baby. That's it. And when you get it fast, it's...
The house renovation and birth of a cultural center are tiny steps. East St. Louis, plagued by the social problems that accompany lack of economic opportunity, stability.
The other things, the social banquets that are taking place.
A gambling parlor and hotel, the Casino Queen, is the community's largest financial engine, providing 40% of the city's general revenue. The hotel is hosting the Moutin Factory Quintet concert for the benefit of the House of Miles. The evening started with music from the Queen of St. Louis Soul, Miss Renee Smith.
And take to the sky. Your daddy's rich and your mama's good again. So hush, little baby, don't you cry.
You guys look just alike. You must be twins. We are. You are twins. I met one of you last night. I met Bruce. One of you I did not meet. I didn't know there were two of you. I believe I met Bruce. I think I met you. Francois. No, who's Bruce?
Bruce is the filmmaker who's filming us.
Okay. And there's Pierre.
Yeah, that's right.
I spent a lot of time with Bruce and Pierre. You are Francois.
So now guess his name because, you know, it makes sense here.
Is it Francis?
Yes.
Louis. You see how closely connected they are? They have our name in his name. And his name is in our name. Louis E. St. Louis. Wonderful.
La vraie joie est de jouer au moment où on monte sur scène. Au moment du début du concert, le plus dur est fait finalement. Il reste que la cerise, il reste que le supplément d'âme, il reste ce qui ne se passe pas automatiquement. Il faut aussi chercher, creuser et bénéficier de ce qu'on appelle l'interplay qui est inhérent au jazz et qui est même seulement au jazz. Ou si tu joues ça, je joue ça, si tu fais ci, je fais ça, ou je fais pas ça d'ailleurs, parce que j'improvise. D'une manière générale, on sait quand commence un morceau, on peut prévoir à peu près comment il va finir, mais tout le contenu d'un morceau de musique mêlant des écritures, des thèmes écrits, des contrepoints, de l'harmonie. Mais ça mêle aussi beaucoup l'improvisation. Donc forcément, on ne sait pas ce qui va s'y passer. Et en effet, selon l'état dans lequel on se trouve, l'état d'esprit, l'état de sentiment, l'état moral, l'état spirituel, selon l'état, évidemment, ça va être différent à chaque fois. D'une minute à l'autre, d'une seconde à l'autre, d'un morceau à l'autre. Donc évidemment, il y a plein de surprises. Ça permet de rester dans un mode de surprise en permanence, dans l'absolu. Mais l'improvisation, ça permet même pas de se sentir, d'être vivant, d'être en vie. De choisir si je veux marcher par là, marcher par là. Ça permet vraiment de défendre une liberté de vie aussi, qui est de plus en plus compliquée à défendre.
The interplay is a conversation. Music is a language. The evolving, expanding exchange is personal and historical. Historical in the large sense as response to the established jazz dialogue. In the immediate, the recognition of your stablemates, playing styles and abilities. Christophe Monio and Manu Kogia have been members of the quintet for 6 years, but have shared musical expressions with Francois and Louis since 1998 and 2003, respectively. Jean-Michel Pilk has played periodically with the brothers since 1981. Long creative exchanges which engage the listener without pandering.
Mon métier, c'est de m'exprimer au travers de la musique. Et j'ai pas tellement le choix de la manière dont je m'exprime. C'est-à-dire que j'entends des choses musicales, et c'est ça qui sort quand je joue. Et voilà, mais j'ai pas tellement le choix. Moi, c'est comme quand tu parles, tu vas pas changer le ton de ta voix en fonction de la personne à qui tu parles. Bah si, les politiciens font ça, mais pas les gens normaux. Comme je ne suis pas un politicien de la musique, bah ma voix est ma voix, et c'est ça qui sort quand je joue de la musique. Et on veut coller toujours des mots sur la musique. Liberté, générosité, etc. Alors tout ça, c'est pas faux. Évidemment qu'il y a tout ça dans la musique. La musique, c'est comme la vie. Et je pense que les gens qui parlent de musique, c'est un peu comme les gens qui veulent mettre des mots absolument sur une existence humaine. Les mots, c'est formidable, mais ça... Bon, les grands écrivains peuvent se rapprocher de la réalité parce que ce sont de grands écrivains, mais... Dans l'ensemble, je trouve que ces mots, tous ces mots, ça tombe à plat et puis finalement, ça enlève du mystère à la musique. Finalement, comme disait Charlie Parker, music speaks better than words. C'est la musique qui doit parler, c'est pas les mots. Après, les gens sont libres de mettre des mots sur la musique, mais moi, quand je joue de la musique, je suis en dehors des mots, je suis en dehors même de l'existence réelle. Je suis dans un univers différent et j'ai pas envie de mettre des mots là-dessus. Je trouve que la musique exprime ce qu'elle a exprimé. Pour moi, c'est suffisant.
Day 8, mid-morning, a 4-hour drive between St. Louis and Memphis. En route, Cairo, Illinois, standing at the confluence of the Ohio River with the Great River. Here, the Ohio's long and vast flow westward from the Allegheny Mountains ends, as it simply becomes a tributary of the mighty Mississippi. This, the poetic gathering of the waters. Racing on, the quintet will later in the day teach a jazz masterclass and give a concert at Stax Music Academy. Memphis, Tennessee, built on a bluff above the floodplain. Around the rich and productive earth, a shipping center developed and a market. Timber, agriculture, cotton, and slaves. Labor-intensive King Cotton always needed slaves. The port was both southern urban and rural, and with the abolition of slavery in 1865, more Afro-Americans migrated to this near town for work. They brought music, spirituals and work songs, the blues. Beyond Beale Street and the Central Business District, the other side of town. Founded in 1957, Stax Records, along with Sun Studio, were the powerhouse producers responsible for the soulful Memphis sound. Rock and roll, gospel, funk, rhythm and blues.
I might be weak, yeah. Oh, but I give you strength.
25 years after the demise of the original company in 2000, An after-school music program was started on the site of the former studio. Choral and instrumental classes are offered, including jazz. Stax Academy's mission is to develop academic, performance, and leadership skills in its students. Music is the starting point.
Change, change, change. 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 Chain of fools.
It's always about something deeper because there's something deeper always within the music. So we utilize music to talk about social issues. And so when we're teaching this music, it's a discipline. All of this music, came from the 50s and 60s and 70s, so all of it is archaic to them, right, until they are exposed to it. When you expose them to it, and then they begin to see themselves with the ability to create, with expanded understanding of music and the chord scales and the different things that you can use, they realize the value of it. Initially, it's frightening for the children to have to step out and do an improvised jazz solo at first. But when you can make them understand that, guess what, you have to improvise every day. If you drive a car, you and someone runs a red light, you have to make some decisions, and that's improvisation.
If you go back to the beginning of jazz history, it started here. It was a mix between African music and music from and Celtic music. That mix created the blues, and then some Europeans came from Eastern European countries and started writing tunes, and that inspired jazz players. There was also the Creole people in New Orleans, and all this mix created jazz. And since then, jazz has influenced its environment and been influenced by its environment. So today, a jazz player has to be familiar with pretty much any kind of music.
What you have to make sure is when you practice is to sing everything you play to make sure. You see, so that you're sure that when you play something, it comes from inside. It doesn't come just from the fingers.
Does it have to be done like it's usually done? Or do you give yourself the right to do it differently?
Good morning, Francois.
Yeah, hello.
Jean-Michel Pilk.
Hello, how you doing?
All right, and Christophe Monio. Christophe Monio. So we're gonna
Radio station WUMR, sending out the sound from the University of Memphis. Your host, Malvin Macy. Jazz always attempting to express freedom, personal and collective.
La meilleure musique du monde, c'est le jazz.
Perfect, I love it.
Perfect.
Music, an evolving dialogue. Behind the notes are many histories. One of the roots of black music, the deplorable history of the subjugation of one human being to another, was borne witness to in this southern town of Memphis. The road forward has been marked by hope and tragedy. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of his slave ancestors seared in the flames of withering injustice.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Words from 1963. Dr. King was murdered here on April 4th, 1968. Barely standing in a poorer section of town is the childhood home of the diva Aretha Franklin. She was a preacher's daughter. For the black community, the constant center of gravity was and is the church, particularly when human behavior shows itself to be less than saintly. We'll pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and if needed, with the help from above.
And if you've ever picked cotton, have you ever picked cotton?
Never have.
Yeah, you should try it one time. And you have to reach into this really hard material that's around the cotton, and it's pointed, and when you reach in, it pushes your cuticles back. It hurts, to pick cotton. And imagine having to pick, thousands of pounds of that, every day. And so the suppression of slavery, how demeaning it was. People have different ways to, in terms of stress management, how do they deal with those situations, and they sing. So it's in part why so much fantastic art comes out of these tragic, moments in history. So I would imagine that being, forcibly taken from your home and stripped, your culture stripped away would give you a different sense of life and reality, that might come out in your art as seeming sad, and because it was. But they created, a really happy music even within those constraints.
Downriver from Memphis, the fertile Mississippi Delta unfolds. 1,800,000 hectares of exceedingly mineral-rich land with the perfect conditions for growing cotton, tobacco, sugar, and rice. Labor-intensive commodity crops. Wealth created on the backs of slaves before the machines of the Industrial Revolution. From its beginning, the U.S. was conflicted about slavery, which was present in all of the states, North and South. The credo, all men are created equal, was the young nation's cornerstone. However, manpower was needed to advance the country. Slavery was accepted as a necessary evil. 90 minutes south of Memphis, where Highway 61 intersects 49, the heart of the Delta, the Devil's Crossroads, Clarksdale. This is where blues legend Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil to play the guitar. Cotton and the blues made this town. plantation workers and sharecroppers frequenting the roadhouses on their precious little time off. Amongst other distractions, live music, local music, the blues. Lyrics of love lost, obligations unfulfilled, opportunities missed. A world without pity. Trance-like rhythms that create a groove. The songs are thoughtful, following the beat of the heart.
Little girl, I wanna go home. I gave you my heart, girl, but you wanted my mind. Oh yeah, I tell you right here, don't fit my head. Oh, else the choking kind. Oh yeah, make you wanna oh yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
Dollar Bill, born in Clarks. He can trace his ancestry no further back than a local plantation. His life, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like the juke joint songsters of the bygone King Cotton era, he sings for tips, awaiting tourists near the Blues Museum. The depressed Clarksdale is attempting to reinvent itself with the blues as calling card. The history of the music on display in the museum, but the source of the blues, ever alive, on the streets.
Here's John Tillery, The Blood of Jesus.
How many of you know that there is power in the blood of Jesus?
Further into cotton country, continuing south. In 1860, the year Abraham Lincoln was elected president, close to 3 million bales of cotton were produced. There were 4 million slaves throughout the country, primarily in the South. As the nation developed, as human sensibilities evolved, involuntary submission of one person to another was slowly being eliminated, state by state. The Union was divided. Lincoln's conviction was to end this chapter of American history. Resistance to his 1863 Emancipation Proclamation was strongest in the states having the highest number of slaves. 55% of Mississippi's population was slaves. The War of Secession, the Civil War, 1861 to 65, fractured the nation along the lines of slavery. As the war raged, the city of Vicksburg, which overlooks the Mississippi River, was considered key. Who controlled Vicksburg controlled the river, which meant water access, north, south, east, and west, through the heart of an expanding nation. After a prolonged and terrible fight, when the North finally prevailed, Lincoln affirmed, "The father of the waters again goes unvexed to the sea." The abolition of slavery did not make the lives of Black Americans a panacea. The old plantation attitudes remained. New legal obstacles to equality were put in place. The economic chasm seemed insurmountable, always with added hurdles. It took nearly a century more for the guarantee of equality before the law to be federally mandated. In those 100 years, 40% of the South's Black population migrated away. Baton Rouge. For the artist, practical decisions must be as creative as their music. The Moutin Factory Quintet only averages 25 concerts per year. A jazz man must be flexible.
Pour un groupe, c'est hyper agréable de jouer plein de concerts à la suite parce que le groupe se soude, même si ce groupe-là, on se connaît quand même bien parce qu'on a fait quand même, je crois, peut-être une centaine de concerts ensemble, je crois que le 100e a été fêté il y a pas longtemps. Et donc on se connaît bien, mais si je faisais un seul groupe, ça ne me suffirait pas. Donc ça, d'un point de vue du business et d'un point de vue, mais surtout d'un point de vue artistique, j'aime beaucoup changer. La musique, c'est pas les mêmes compositions, ce sont pas les mêmes musiciens, ce sont pas les mêmes orchestrations. Il ne s'agit pas de faire le caméléon, mais de trouver l'espace, les sons qui vont porter la musique, quoi. Et c'est un challenge c'est le challenge qui m'excite en fait. Voilà, quand je parle aussi d'improvisation, ça vient de là, d'improviser l'orchestration et tout ça. C'est des choses que j'aime beaucoup. Ouais.
Monsieur, madame, je vous présente Moutin Quintet. Et voilà.
No, but we won't get it. Why people keep abandoning I could be a grandmother.
What year were you placed?
In the busy Baton Rouge port, anchored at the river's edge, a ramshackle floater, the Shameless. Kelly Phillips is making his first and last voyage on a boat as he sails to his destiny. It has been 18 months since he and his pooch Sapphire launched at Prairie du Chien in Wisconsin, which is where Joliet and Marquette started their epic canoe trip 3.5 centuries ago. They never made it this far, having been warned by friendly native people that there were unfriendly ones ahead. The French explorers turned around and paddled back upstream. The novice pilot's fear is not flesh-eating natives, but the big ships and heavy traffic he will encounter further down.
They gave me 3 months to live. I ended up in hospice, and then I took and I called my brother up and I said, I'm not dying in New Jersey. I said, find me a houseboat on the Mississippi, and that's where I may die. And I took and I got to Wisconsin. I got to Wisconsin and got on my boat. March 16th I got on the boat, and I took in 3 months went by, 4 months went by, 5 months went by, and I'm like, well, I overlived what the doctor said, so now my plans are all screwed up. I don't know what else to do, so I got up and I went downriver. I've been meeting the best people, and just the river's great. I mean, there's really, really pretty spots on the river. I'll go out and I'll just tie up somewhere and stay out there a couple of days. It's just awesome. It's peaceful. Now, I don't know what it's going to be like when I'm downriver. There's a lot of ships and stuff. I just appreciate, the fact that I'm still alive, and that I'm able, because of the Mississippi River people, to be able to do this journey, and hopefully I can get to Venice, which Venice is the end of the world. That's on the other side of New Orleans, so to get there would be a great accomplishment. And then everybody goes, what are you going to do when you get to Venice? And I thought about it, I'm like, Jesus, I'm not scared of dying. If I die now or tomorrow, I'm good. But to get to the end of the river and still be alive and not knowing what to do, I'm scared of that. But it sounds weird, but it's true. So, I don't know.
Kelly, just keep on improvising. En route to the Big Easy, 131 clicks to roll. This evening's concert at Snug Harbor Jazz Bistro.
Moi, et je crois François aussi, on est né, on est dans notre univers, quand on était môme, quand on était enfant, il y avait ça, le jazz. Ça nous a sauté au visage, ça nous a sauté aux oreilles, ça nous a sauté au corps, ça nous a habité. Duke Ellington, c'est quand même pas rien, quoi. Lionel Hampton, c'était ça qu'on écoutait quand on avait 6 ans.
C'est-à-dire que je crois qu'on était des gamins très très enthousiastes, très dans la joie et à la fois et très dans l'émotion.
Et cette musique, elle véhicule à la fois la joie, la convivialité d'exprimer et en même temps, elle véhicule la lourdeur de la vie. C'était dans une espèce de truc. C'est ce truc-là qui nous a imprégnés définitivement.
New Orleans, founded in 1718 by Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne de Bienville, the southern capital of New France. It developed into an international port and market, cotton, sugar, and human beings. It was an exotic agglomeration of cultures, influences, and people. African, English, Spanish, Creole, and Native American, from millionaires to slaves. Louis Armstrong Park. It stands today where the drumbeat of enslaved Africans once animated the 18th century Sunday markets of Congo Square. There was one free day per week without the master's supervision, to socialize, to dance, to make music. Across town, Storyville. Now only wall murals and the paintings in a hotel garage pay tribute to the city's long-gone red light district. From the late 1800s, black musicians perfected their music, performing in the legal houses of pleasure. It was a mixture of forms, African and European, brass band ragtime, the blues and spirituals, ad improvisation. Jazz was evolving. In 1970, the district was shuttered, and the musicians moved on, generally heading north, carrying the music. In France, the first taste of jazz arrived when the musician-composer James Reese Europe, accompanied by an all-black regiment to fight in World War I. The Harlem Hellcats Regimental Band performed to great acclaim throughout France. The seeds were planted. The evolutions of jazz are in the listening, intelligent vibrations of air, a series of fleeting instants of being in the moment, the act of hearing and response, the art of expression which is both personal and addresses the larger dialogue of the music. Distinctive by definition, as each artist's sensibility is unique. the whole of the sum being greater than its parts. Direction, north, for the final concert of this 13-day tour, New York Calling, the long 20-hour drive, 2,100 kilometers. The Mississippi River continues its uninterrupted flow south.
La première difficulté, c'était de dire que, a priori, le jazz est américain, donc ça va être compliqué d'amener un groupe de Français aux États-Unis et de faire tourner aux États-Unis. On s'est rendu compte que c'était pas complètement vrai. C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, il y a vraiment un public qui s'en fout complètement de savoir si on est... et même à la limite qui aime bien le fait qu'on vienne de l'autre côté de l'Atlantique.
Tout ce qui est les détails, ça va du booking à l'organisation, au fait effectivement à tout ce qui est la cuisine, disons, l'intendance, louer des véhicules pour se déplacer ou acheter des billets d'avion, enfin tout ça, on produit en fait, on devient donc producteur, booking agent, avocat, immigration parce qu'il faut des visas.
En fait, on se débrouille comme des artisans. On travaille comme des artisans. Après, ce que ça a voulu dire de le monter, c'est compliqué, mais on y est arrivé. Et c'est parce qu'évidemment, il y a toujours la question de l'argent qui se pose là-dedans. Même si, évidemment, les gens qui viennent à nos concerts ici achètent des tickets, ces tickets ne suffisent pas à payer ce que coûte toutes ces tournées. Donc on a cherché des sponsors, on en a trouvé essentiellement en Europe, il faut quand même le dire, essentiellement en France.
100 kilometers south of New Orleans, adjacent to old Fort Jackson, stands a monument to Sieur de La Salle and his resolute crew. The long canoe trip, 1,300 kilometers to arrive at the great river's mouth, 2 months after embarking on the adventure. It was now definitive. The Mississippi flowed south to the Gulf of Mexico and was not a passage west to the Orient. From the journal of Nicolas de La Salle, we cut down a tree from which we made a post that we planted and there attached the king's arms made from the copper of a kettle. We also erected a cross, and in the ground below it set a leaden plaque, written upon it the words, "In the name of Louis XIV, King of France and Navarre, the 9th of April, 1682. We sang the Vesilia Regis upon planting the cross, then the Te Deum, and fired muskets 3 times. Our provisions were failing. We only had a handful of corn a day. The following day, the explorers got back into their canoes and began paddling upstream against the current, 3,400 kilometers to return to Quebec. Meager compensation after claiming a territory, the river drainage basin, that is today known to cover 3.2 million square miles from the Gulf of Mexico into Canada, from the Appalachian Mountains spreading west to the Rockies. It was named La Louisiane. Never mind that the Spanish had claimed the land the century before, or that the charters of the Atlantic Coast British colonies theoretically stretched to the Pacific. And the Native Americans? They had been living in the watershed for 15,000 years. But now it was part of the French Empire and then the First French Republic. It would remain so until 1803, when Napoleon sold the Louisiana Territory to the burgeoning United States. The river was the highway, the thread connecting the northern and southern poles of New France. The ground where La Salle planted his marker has long been covered by water, the Mississippi River forever changing its course. Mississippi dreaming. A few short days ago, Louis Moutin was in a hospital bed in Paris. To watch him perform revealed little of his painful recuperating condition or the rigors of the trip. Day 13, the final stretch of highway for a Monday evening concert in Dizzy's Club, Jazz at Lincoln Center in the Apple. A total of 5,000 kilometers in 13 days through the heart of North America. 8 concerts, new ground, new audiences. After tonight's performances, each musician will move on to their own challenge until the brothers have organized the next round of concerts, when the musical dialogue will begin anew. A tough way to make a living, but even tougher to imagine doing otherwise.
Let's hear it for the Moutin Factory Quintet.